All right, welcome to the latest episode, the first one of 2024. Happy New Year. This is the Dan Time Podcast. I'm your host, Dan McArdle. Thanks so much for being here, for subscribing, for absorbing, for immersing yourself in this show. Every week, I try to make it a fun and fulfilling experience for you, the listener. Bringing you a variety of guests with very unique stories. I hope you've enjoyed the last few episodes featuring Dan Kabelka coming back for our holiday special, Emily Haynes Cook, my dear friend, blues great Danielle Moralia, music theater performers Danny Pike and Danny Rubio, and so many others. Go back and check the past episodes for the full list. My guest today is veteran singer-songwriter and Melbourne, Australia's very own Dan Brodie. A two-time ARIA Award nominee, Dan has released 8 studio albums plus a few EPs over a recording career that spans a quarter century. He has led Dan Brodie and the Broken Arrows Band, Dan Brodie and the Grieving Widows, and Dan Brodie and the Shadows of Love. His latest record, The Ballad of Cowboy Dan, ought to be on any Best of 2023 albums lists. When you listen to the opening 4 tracks of the album, in order, if your experience is like mine, with their varying themes, tempos, orchestration, and culminating in the infectious "Losing Love is Dangerous," you're going to say to yourself, that's it. That's it. That's the height of this record. There's no way it can pick back up after that. And then you realize the ride has only just begun. Dan and I dive deep into this album. You're going to love the conversation. Here is what some critics had to say about Dan Brodie and about the Ballad of Cowboy Dan. Martin Bolton from The Age wrote, "If Dan Brodie were an actor, he wouldn't be the star of the show. He'd be the guy the other actors on set wanted to hang out with, the guy the director would turn to when he needed a moment of inspiration to get the show on the road." This album shows why Brodie was twice nominated for ARIA Awards. And Chris Familton from PostToWire.com wrote, "On the new album, Brodie successfully finds common ground for his many influences, opening with the magnificent and brooding 'I Can Feel Love Closing In.' He delivers the lines in a way that barely hangs together, which only adds to the melancholic romance and compelling storytelling." Dan is very well regarded, and he's a huge supporter of his local music scene, and it just loves getting up on stage playing with his other musician friends. Be sure to visit his website at danbrodie.com.au. You can purchase the CD version, the LP version, get all the updates on Dan in the coming year. All right, let's get to the conversation. It is Dan Brodie time. There is just quite a story to tell here, Dan, and I'm so thrilled to have you. We are going to be discussing your catalog, but also promoting your most recent record, which the New York Times and maybe some other mainstream publications put out like a best of the year. And I'm not buttering you up. I really think this should fall on that type of list of the albums that you need to listen to. The Ballad of Cowboy Dan is the latest record, released September 1st of 23. Dan, this is, like you say in the title track, for where you've come and where your story began, I'd say it's a modern masterpiece.
Thank you.
Great to have you. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm really good, thanks. It's summer over here, but you wouldn't know it because it's raining every day, but the weather's warm, so that's one thing. And everyone's on holidays and in the great Australian tradition, drinking themselves and eating themselves into oblivion. Yeah, I know. Except for me, I'm not. But
yeah, I've pumped the brakes on some of that, just heavy indulgence on all ends. And sometimes people think indulgence is just the really bad stuff. Sometimes it's just pigging out and just eating and eating and yeah, you get a little older. If you want to feel good most days, you pull back a little bit.
Yeah, it's
Dan,
true. I stopped drinking a couple of years ago as well, which has been a really great thing, really positive thing in my life. So it's good to focus on what you enjoy and make the most of your time.
I'm really excited to hear that. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't prepared to ask you if you're still drinking because on each record there's usually a song, and it may have some dark humor about drinking. But I'm glad I understand. About 10 years ago, you really had a serious health scare that probably put a lot of things in
Yeah,
perspective for you.
yeah, yeah. I did. I got diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is cancer of the lymphatic system, and I was touring in Europe, and I'd go to sing a song in this big outdoor festivals, and I'd go to sing, and I'd just start coughing, and also after the show, I would just say to the band that I wanted to go back to the hotel and you know go to bed, which isn't like me at all. I mean, I was always the last man standing at a party, and so I got back to Australia, and yeah, that set off a whole. Anyone who's been seriously ill, things move very, very rapidly, and yeah, I had chemotherapy and radiation for a year, some treatment, and thankfully came out the other side of it, hopefully a little bit wiser.
Was the album Deep Deep Love, was it complete before you started feeling ill, or were you in the middle of writing those songs?
No, it was finished. It was all finished, and I was about to organise an album launch in Melbourne, and I just delayed it for a year, and so yeah.
Well, we'll talk about the back catalog a little bit here in a minute, but let's flash forward to the Ballad of Cowboy Dan. I just want to say, without just saying, "Oh, it's a great record," "Oh, it's a masterpiece," I want to tell you why I think it is so well done. It starts off with a spoken word track, as far as the vocal line and melody,
Mm,
and that's the very first Dan Brodie song that I heard. And when I played it, I thought, okay, this is interesting, and I was feeling it, and I was thinking, well, if the entire record is just like this track, I don't know if it's for me. And then
yeah,
you get into track number 2, which is Old Betty, and it's just an entirely
yeah.
different tempo, entirely different feel. I really wanted to ask you this because by the time you get to, and it's on this podcast, I can't say the words, you can, just because it's clean format. But track 3, it really sets the
Mm,
tone for what hits you on number 4. Losing Love is Dangerous. By the time I had completed those first 4 tracks, you just had me. I could have laid on the floor and spread my arms wide and said, "I'm in." Have you guys had a chance, just speaking of that track, "Losing Love is Dangerous," to perform that live? And if so, you got to be bringing the house down with that song.
yeah, we played it on Saturday night, and we opened with it, and yeah, it actually did. It's the second time we played it live, and it's a pretty traditional 12-bar belter, but it certainly hit in all the right spots. The audience was really there with us for the song, so nice way to open a set, I think. It's a nice sort of statement of intention in terms of, it's quite a forceful sounding song.
Right. And you and your brother Chris collaborated on that song and maybe a couple others or one other on the album. I think the instrumental track.
Mm, that's right.
But it's funny what I say about the opener. Now when I go back and listen to it, that might be my favorite song. I Can Feel Love Closing In. But it had to be arranged in that order. How much time in the studio do you spend when all the songs are written and figuring out the track listing? Is that something you go over with the?
I got some friends to do listing for me,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's interesting your observations of the album, because normally you would probably start with the faster songs, and then you usually like, track 4 or something, you put a slow song in. Most musicians, I think, would treat it like a live show. But I found the job too difficult, and I got some friends to do it for me, and I loved what they said. Oh, you should start the album with the sort of spoken word piece and finish with the spoken word piece to create more of a narrative. And so that's what I went with. It's quite a hard job to do, when you've been living with the songs for a couple of years and recording them. So that's what we ended up doing.
That opening track, though, because sometimes, do you ever hear people say, I had to give it a few listens when they speak about an album, and then it becomes their favorite album, maybe of the year?
Yeah.
Certain bands, like a favorite band puts out a new record, and you're thinking, you definitely don't hate it, but you don't understand it all yet. And that was such a beautiful thing. The first thing that I did appreciate because I play drums. I wouldn't say I play them that well, but I play them well enough. But I'm more of a lyric guy. The lyrics really jump out at me, and that's what piqued my interest, was the story that's being told. I saw her again last night. She was playing pool, eating some potato chips, and then you describe the female, long dark hair, brown eyes, and then as the song goes on, she takes on different forms, different personas. I have to ask you, Dan, sometimes artists don't want to reveal the meaning, but man, that sounds like just the red-blooded male saying, I love women. I fall in love.
Yeah.
I can't help myself.
Yeah, it is that, but it's a little bit more than that as well. Let's say the character also doesn't know what he wants.
Oh yeah.
There's that as well. So on another smaller level, it's trying to show that the character is extremely confused.
Yeah, I could definitely see
but
that.
That's not as there's that as well. But yeah, the first thing is pretty spot on. Yeah.
Again, in track number 3 is the way I have to describe it. But folks, if you're listening to this podcast and you're sitting down and you're able to maybe pull up the track listing, you can follow along with what we're talking about here. Dan, is this a reflection of all the things you've heard from all the passersby over the years that tell you, oh, you're just so wonderful, and then they've been there for the highs, but they're gone during the lows, and then they're back for the highs? Are you reflecting some of that back at those types, or because I love that song, and again, it goes back to your subtle humor, and you just have a real deft touch.
Is that the swear?
Yeah,
So that song, people generally aren't as nasty towards us as we are towards ourselves, and that's probably more. That's my own. That song is really just a litany of self-criticism.
Yeah,
that's something that probably an Australian would say, as opposed to someone in America.
Going back to your brother Chris, I was thinking about this today. I wanted to make sure that I asked. He's basically been there every step of the way in various formats on most of the records. Going back to your very first show in 1990, you guys performed as teenagers. Do you ever think about, and let me just say, on this record, Chris contributes lap steel, banjo, and guitar on various tracks, and has writing credits on those 2 songs, Lost Inside a Dream and Losing Love is Dangerous. But do you ever think about what your career would have been like, maybe at some of those low points, without your brother there by your side? Because I have to imagine he stuck with you when you're high rolling and when you're just down on the ground.
Yeah, he has. He's been extremely important, and some records he's maybe just contributed one guitar solo to one song, but I have an extremely close relationship with my 2 siblings, my brother and my sister, and they've been a huge source of strength for me. We lost our mother when we were quite young, and our father relatively, and so we're a very, very close family, and I'd be really in deep trouble without them in my life. So they're both extremely important, and my brother's very much a source of support for me. It's been great. Yeah.
And Chris plays bass in the band Dallas Crane.
Yeah.
So
Chris does that.
Dan also, so you used the same producer on this record from the last album, Funeraria de Val, maybe way off there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty close, I think. I don't really know.
Mike Hubbard.
Yeah, Michael Hubbard is great. We had a mutual friend, this kind of legendary guitarist here in Australia that passed away called Spencer P. Jones, and he played in a band called the Beasts of Bourbon, who they had a lot of success in Europe, more so than the US. And he came from this kind of punk aesthetic, and his band was the Johnnies, and I guess he started this kind. I mean, he was kind of in that genre of cowpunk, which I know some US bands did as well. Anyway, Mick played guitar with him in his last iteration, Spencer P. Jones and the Escape Committee. And I used to go and see Spencer play, and I met Mick, and Spencer ended up passing away, and Mick started producing, and he's been great. He's been fantastic. He's really creative guy and some good ideas, and yeah, easy to work with. So we've made two albums together. Yeah.
I love that record as well. You can tell that the production quality on the latest record, The Ballad of Cowboy Dan and Funeraria, you can tell they have the same hands in there, maybe.
Yeah, he's kind of got pop sensibilities. You can hear that. You can hear that with some of the guitar stuff that he does. He's good at finding the hook of the song.
The guitar work, especially on the Outer, and folks listening, there's a video that you can watch for this song. Some excellent guitar work, kind of at the middle point and towards the end of the song. There, is that all you?
That song is all Chris.
Okay.
It's pretty kind of free form. It's got a riff throughout it and stuff. I made that film clip. I think I made it during lockdown or just as we started. We had a pretty harsh lockdown here in Melbourne. Everyone went a bit crazy. I think we were locked down for 300 days or something. So
wow.
It was pretty brutal.
On that note, I was going to ask, because I've talked to some other artists, with the lockdown being so prolonged, and you're used to moving pretty fast, or you're at this venue and then that venue and this location and that location. Yeah. Now all of a sudden you're in one spot. When you come out of it, is it easy to get back into that frenetic pace again, or do you kind of take this new comfort in just being still for a moment with your life?
That happened for a while. I mean, COVID seems to be back this summer now. I just spoke to a friend yesterday. A lot of people have it again, and I've had it twice, I think. Once, I can't remember. I think COVID really taught people to have an appreciation of each other. You know, as much as we all annoy each other at times, I feel like that was a positive take from it, that people need each other for support, particularly the music community. People seem to become a lot nicer to each other after COVID. So that's been good.
Yeah, they probably took the companionships that they had maybe not for granted. Well, maybe they did.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to sit on your cell phone and text people, but to do that is the only way to communicate with people, because you can't leave your home. You start to long for the human connection.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm back into it. I play piano with a bunch of bands as well, so that keeps me busy. I really enjoy that side of my career. That's relatively recently. That's only been for a few years, actually. So I play probably about 3 or 4 nights a week. So that's good. Yeah. So I just love playing live. That's where that's like the moment of truth. From the moment I first did it, when I was the first pub show I had was when I was 15, and it was the most terrifying and exhilarating feeling of my life. And, like someone trying to find their hit, a junkie trying to find that great high. I feel like you're sort of chasing that your whole life, that feeling again. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, I can see that. When you're 15 years old and you're up there, even as, like you said, as terrified as that first experience was, Is it almost like a theme park ride where you still want to do it all over again?
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's bizarre, and some nights are terrible. I mean, you put on a brave face and you're professional, but some nights you go home, you're like, oh, for God's sake, that was just, the sound was bad, the audience was unresponsive. But I don't know, even the bad nights are better than a working week doing something that you don't like. I box as well, and I haven't fought competitively, but I've done a lot of sparring in the ring, and that to me feels exactly the same as playing a live show. It's like the bell goes and you're on, and you've got a tiny amount of time to defend yourself, punch, move, duck, weave, survive, and express yourself. And if you make one wrong move, you're on the canvas. So I don't know. That might be a little naff, that analogy, but I've always likened it as a similar thing.
I feel like you probably need to be on the clock, under pressure,
Yeah,
and just that need to challenge yourself.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah, it's like a boxing match.
I could see that.
And sometimes you get knocked to the ground, but that's part of it. You never show that, like in a boxing ring, you never show that you're hurt. You just keep going.
And Dan, in your songwriting and in your lyrics, this is really what, and not just because I was going to have you as a guest on the show, but when I was diving into the catalog, getting into the songs, it really struck me how you open yourself up. You're not just the guy on the top of the mountain, but you're not afraid to write lyrics that show how hurt you are or how much you're longing for love that has been lost.
Yeah,
I made a lot of money. I lost it twice. I never did listen to my own advice. Tie myself to a cross at night, and then goes on. My head and my heart get mixed up sometimes. I cry myself to sleep at night. There's a lot of men that have gone to bed with tears in their eyes, and very few of them talk about it or write about it. I thought that was huge.
yeah,
And is that My Last Picture Show? I think
yeah,
that is from. Yeah, I love that. That's kind of
yeah.
on
It's my
the
last.
second half of the album.
That's right. Yeah.
Just beautiful stuff.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's good to be honest, I suppose. And yeah, I mean, it is very honest, and there's fact mixed with fiction, and I feel far more comfortable writing about that than let's just say that for me it's a much more comfortable realm than, let's say, real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not, without bearing my soul, I'm not the easiest person to talk about any of that stuff in person, and those closest to me would probably agree with that. And so this is my way of letting it out with a catchy, I mean, that song in particular has got a real catchy swing. It's quite an upbeat swinging song, but it comes at a price because personally I'm probably not going to talk about any of that stuff. So I'm sort of setting myself up for some problems.
Well, I just so enjoy it because as
Oh, good.
a fan of music and of an artist that is an open book, it helps me get in touch with some of those emotions as well. Everybody's got something unresolved in their heart,
Yeah,
in their head, and it may be from 2 weeks ago or 20 years ago, and
yeah.
you may be 98% over something, but you still have that thought running through your mind every so often. So I love that.
Oh, that's great to hear. I mean, I, in the same way that I love movies, and I love living vicariously through actors, and that's probably a similar thing. It's exaggerated versions of people, or yeah, I think that's what I mean.
And Dan, I also put in my notes here. You Can't Stop What's Begun. This song, I had the hardest time getting my brother to listen to anything that I recommend, and it could be right in his wheelhouse, and it will take him 2 years to finally listen to it. So I got to think of clever ways to get him to, all right, well, listen to this one track. You Can't Stop What's Begun. Dan, I think that a Netflix producer, a Hollywood producer needs to approach you about this track and include it in a full length film. It's just got that feel to it. It's got that haunting whisper, the devil on the shoulder type thing. Take the money and the gun. You know what? Do you know what? Remember what inspired that song? Another question, maybe: do you ever start scratching out lyrics before you have the melody, or does the melody come first?
So that song, and in relation to your question, it's usually those kind of mood pieces that kind of write themselves. It's usually a feeling that you have, and the words just pour out. The whole feeling pours out. So it's like whatever you're feeling, and you wake up, and often it's in the morning as well. You get out of bed, you wake up feeling like that, and that song in particular has got a real sense of fatalism to it. That it doesn't matter which road you take, things aren't gonna end well, and so
I have noticed some songs do have a nihilistic quality to them. You know, I think
I've been in that. I think I've fallen into that feeling a lot. Not a lot, but throughout my life, as we all have. And one of the reasons why I stopped drinking was to sort of put a stop to that, put a stop line there. Doesn't mean I still can't write about it and feel it, but it's a bad place to be, and it can lead to a whole bunch of trouble. And we've all seen friends and aspects of ourselves go on this nihilistic trip, and I just think that it's people talk about heaven and hell and everything, and I think that's what hell is. It's hopelessness, and it's within us all, as is God and goodness and love, equal parts. And I suppose it frightens me, and so it's quite interesting to write about.
Yeah, speaking about sobriety, if you had asked me 2 months ago, I had no plan to stop drinking. I still don't know if I'll have a drink in 2 weeks or next Wednesday. I don't know yet, but for some reason I got COVID in November, and sometimes if you go down for a week and a half with the flu, or you just don't feel well enough to drink or smoke cigarettes. There were times when I smoked that a few days would go by, and your body thanks you for not being able to do that when you feel better. But yeah, so I've actually put together like an 8-week stretch of, and I've got cold beer in the fridge. I mean, it's right there, but I kind of like, at least day by day, not having it in my routine. Didn't really need to be there right now.
Yeah.
But
that's great.
You notice some things. I think in life we need, a lot of people, especially in this day and age, you need immediate results. There's an immediacy that we want to see. There's this give and take. All right, if I put the cigarettes down, I better be feeling like $100 tomorrow. If I stop drinking, you don't really notice how your body improves, or just the way you feel improves the next day. It's going to take some time, but you will notice it.
Yeah. Well, that's really positive.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can really drink after the age of 40, because you're declining, right? Your body is declining. And Henry Rollins, he had a quote recently. He said, exercising is your body's trying to fool your body that you're not dying. So that was pretty funny. But each their own. Having said all that, Dan, I'm in the alcohol selling business. I mean, I don't get hired to play in a pub or in a hotel, for the sake of it. You're selling. Ultimately, the way it's set up, it has been for a long time. You're selling booze. So, but I can only live my own life on my own terms and let people know the positive aspects of my life. But I'm not going to ram it down people's throat either. So.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, but 8 weeks is great. I mean, I got a book that was over lockdown. So over lockdown, I went to the bottle shop, and we got some government money, and because it couldn't work. And so I grabbed my money and I bought every bottle of that you have in a cocktail bar, and I set up my own private cocktail bar in my room. And I always wanted to make martinis and margarita, I got right into it. So I did that for about, I don't know, 3-6 months, and then woke up one day and said, well, that's, I can't keep doing this. And so I got this book called 100 Days Sober, and each day had an affirmation. And after 100 days, I thought, I'll keep going with it because I felt better. So that's what happened.
That's really good. It's the long term, like, oh my gosh, I got to quit forever, is a little overwhelming for people.
It is.
But
it is. And I don't think people should just have a week off or something. Start with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Talking about this, my favorite track from your back catalog, because I really love the new album, but Tear Us Down and the video that goes along with that, I had quite a powerful experience watching that video. It's like the first thing that's in focus is just you, and then your guitar comes into play, and then what maybe is a cocktail comes into play.
Yeah.
That's lyrically, musically, that the chord progression in that song, I just think it's one of your standout tracks.
Oh, thank you.
Do you perform that one live still?
Yeah, I do. I actually just performed it live with a band at a festival recently for the first time in, ever. I'd never played it with a band. When I play solo, I play it. At the moment, I'm trying to blend. I've got this kind of real huge difference in the music. There's this real punk, energetic rock and roll side, and then there's this quite tender-hearted balladry. And at the moment, I suppose I'm trying to reconcile those two things, because I think that's what I do, and that's what people respond to. And to go one way isn't a true representation of myself. So I've just started playing that song again, Tear Us Down. I like that song, and that one took literally as long as the song is to write. It took about 3 or 4 minutes to write. It was just, I remember when I wrote it in a kitchen with a 6-pack of beer a long time ago, and the music video was done in the middle of chemotherapy, so I was 3 months into it. And I was so with chemo, people have had it, I'm sure, plenty of your listeners, you get sick and then you feel better again, and as you're on the upswing, they dose you again. So it was like on the upswing, and I think I had to go back the next day or something, and then I'd get sick again. So we shot that. That's a good video. I like it. It's pretty raw, actually, really. I mean, it doesn't get much rawer than that, I suppose, because I wasn't feeling very well. It was really good of my brother and my friend Dave to make the video for me too. So it was a lovely gift of them.
Yeah. And like you were just saying, there's multiple sides to you. You take a video and a song like that, and then Un Don't Tra Saucisson, and the video for that one is quite comical. So, folks, if you, again, I think I said this at the top of the episode, if you listen to a couple tracks and you think you've got Dan Brodie pinned down to one style, he's going to completely flip the script on you the more you listen, and you're going to love it. That video, that was great. That must have taken some collaboration, the concept of that video, Un Don't Tra Saucisson, and that's from Funeraria.
Yeah, that was made by a friend of mine, Joe Volanti, and he's kind of involved in the comedy acting world. He got a bunch of different people involved, and then my friend did the graphics with the sausages and stuff. And I really like that song, Un Deux Trois Saucisson. I've done a fair bit of touring in Europe over the years, and got a bit of a fan base in France. And I just, I like those kind of, with songwriting, to answer the question about the variety of songs, I love all songwriting. I find it very difficult to focus on one style, but I do admire people that do that. And I think you have an easier career if you do. You do because people go, all right, cool, they're this or they're that. What I do is it's what I do, but yeah, it doesn't make for an easy ride. I'm like the Ween of Australia. You know, here's a country record now, here's a metal record now, here's a but for me, it's all part of the same tapestry. Un, deux, trois, saucisson is a fun gimmick song with this intense refrain of one, two, three sausages, which I guess appeals to my sense of humor. So what can I say?
Yeah, and it has a real psychedelic quality to it, which I can imagine goes over pretty well in the live performance. And
Yeah,
and you speak in track number 3, again, as I call it, on the Ballad of Cowboy Dan. You only like me because I'm big in France. So an ode to your French fans there.
yeah,
Also, Dan, and I'll put this when I promote the episode, I'll make sure to mention your accolades here. You're twice nominated for ARIA Music Awards, and that was for your major label debut on Capitol Records, Empty Arms, Broken Hearts, which, again, this is, if what I read was correct, you guys went back in one night and did the retrospective, The Big Hearted Loving Man, which captured like your favorite songs from those early records up to about 2014, or you recorded that in one night.
yeah,
That's a good one because some of those tracks on the first few albums I couldn't find immediately available as far as for download.
yeah,
But some great songs there.
yeah. The first album,
I think "Lower Me Down"
yeah,
was one of my favorites from. Well, "Lower Me Down" is from My Friend the Murderer.
yeah. That's one of my favorite albums, My Friend the Murderer. I released that in 2011, and that's the first independent record that I made. I got signed to EMI when I was pretty young, EMI Capital, and yeah, that was a really trippy experience. They were a good team of people. Like, they were this guy, Tony Harlow, this English guy, was in Australia running EMI. He loved what I did and he signed me. And so I released 3 albums with them. And yeah, the ARIA Awards, they're called. Got to go to that and get nominated. And we worked with some American producers and flew them out for that record, Empty Arms, Broken Hearts. A guy called John Wooler, who'd worked with Willie Nelson, and this other guy called Oz Fritz, who'd done Bone Machine with Tom Waits. He was an engineer. And yeah, they came out and produced and engineered the record. And yeah, it was a good experience. It was, of its time. I don't know. I don't think it was fun at the time. You work with big marketing teams. I mean, that stuff's just not really around anymore unless you're Taylor Swift or something. That so many people I know didn't get to experience that. It was a once in a lifetime. It was the music industry. I mean, people argue that there's not even a music industry anymore, which I don't know. It's so DIY now. There's no rules, and it's kind of exhilarating. You can make whatever music videos you want. You can record whenever you want. It's pretty cool. You got to look at the positives, I think.
Yeah, like you said, it fit the time period.
Yeah.
Is it right that you financed the first EP, I'm Floating Mama, maybe even Big Black Guitar?
Yep.
I guess, or the independent release before.
Yeah, I just financed that myself through cleaning or whatever I was doing at the time. And then I was on a small label, Australian label, and then that led to the deal with EMI. And yeah, I mean the difference between being on a major label and independent, I mean it's vast experiences. I mean the budgets for the music videos were huge. The budgets for the recording were huge. So I feel pretty blessed that I got to experience it's that almost famous type, what people dream about. I got to experience it, so it was good. Yeah.
Well, I think that you've written your best record. I read artist interviews where it's common for the artists themselves to say, "Oh, this is the best thing that we've put out. This is some of my best songwriting." It's like, well, of course that you're going to say that, but as a listener and just the evolution that I've studied just the past few weeks, I really think the Ballad of Cowboy Dan, it's a culmination. It's the story. I guess you probably started hearing Cowboy Dan way back when you released the first single, "I Love You, Baby." Were people calling you Cowboy Dan in those early years? And so you
Yeah,
said, well, shoot, I guess I probably just need to do an album here. You guys have created this character. Let's give it some life.
exactly. That's exactly what happened. Uh, um, so yeah, exactly. That's exactly why I did it. And I just thought it was hilarious. And people haven't used that title for a very long time. So I thought, well, I'll just, resurrect it and create this character, and I'll give you exactly what you want. And the songs have a lot of gusto and a lot of bravado and a lot of myth creation. And it's also commenting on that as well. The Americana scene, alt country scene, it used to be called, is one of the fastest growing scenes in the world, particularly in Australia. I'm sure in the US as well. And every man and woman and their dog is donning a cowboy hat and talking about the Dust Bowl and their experience, as an Okie. And and anyway, hey, I just thought it might be a nice time to go into that world. I hope that doesn't come across as too cynical, because I do love that kind of music, and I play that sort of. I mean, I dip my toe pretty heavily into the sort of twang and stuff, and it's very heartfelt. But I also thought it was a nice a way to present an album.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the artwork, the design there, it's captivating. Now,
right.
a recent review of your music, Chris Familton,
Yep.
posttowire.com. For people listening, this is what he had to say. Quote, "If you can imagine Dylan and Nilsson recording an eclectic cosmic Americana record, it might sound something like this impressive album." I think he hit the nail on the head there. Um, I know way back you were referred to as Australia's Mellencamp. Get some comparisons to Elvis on certain tracks,
Yep.
Johnny Cash, Steve Earle, probably more appropriately. But again, yeah, you kind of got little flashes of those characters, those performers, but there's only one Dan Brodie, and and you kind of don't get too far or too pot committed, I guess, to one character, one style, one type of songwriting.
No, I don't. And I mean, I wouldn't really want to. I think life's way too interesting to go into just one style. You got to inject your personality into it. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, Dan, it hasn't been the easiest career in the world. And if I reined it in a bit, I probably could have had an easier ride. But again, you can only be yourself. The people that I really admire, I mentioned Spencer P. Jones, there's other Australian songwriters, and songwriters around the world. I mean, Dylan's a fine example. I mean, he's done exactly what he wanted to do. So, obviously Neil Young is a great touchstone, and another guy's done exactly what he wanted to do. So that's what something that I really respect.
Well, Dan, we'll have to hopefully connect again, maybe this time next year, maybe this time 6 months from
Yeah,
now.
I'd
I
love
have
to.
so much more I want to dive into with you, but folks, visit the website. It's danbrodie.com.au. You can find the videos there. You can order the Ballad of Cowboy Dan on LP, on vinyl. You can read Dan's bio. You can read some other press on him. We didn't talk about Lost Not Found. It's a very wow. I mean, you see some of the tracks on here, and you have an expectation. I mean, I like Motorhead, and I saw Damage Case, and I said I had because at first when you're looking at it, you don't immediately know that this is Motorhead. And so when I hit play, you could have never predicted this interpretation. We'll have to, again, like I said, that's a topic for another episode. Dan, you've been so generous with your time. I'm glad to introduce you to my listeners, get you some more exposure. And my gosh, critics, get with the program over here in the States. Get on the Dan Brodie train, and let's get some hype for this album. And I'm excited, like you said, that you just beyond what you're doing and your own music, you like just getting up there and playing with other performers, just playing music.
I do. Yeah, I just love connecting with an audience, and I've been playing accordion as well, which I love too.
And you play piano, acoustic, electric guitar, harmonica, and I did mean to highlight the backup female vocalist on some of your tracks. I may have to ask you their names. I had them written down, but I've got things scattered here. Who are, like, on the Ballad of Cowboy Dan, the title track?
I got a bunch of friends in Melbourne that are all called Katie.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to put them all in the same because that'll piss them off. But so there's Katie Bates, who plays bass in my band, and she's a singer-songwriter in her own right. She's great. She just did a tour of the US and Europe with another songwriter playing bass with her, actually, for 3 months. Played Nashville all over. And so she plays bass. She's back in Australia and sings, got a beautiful voice. And then on that song, My Last Picture Show, there's a girl called Katie Brianna, who's also a great singer-songwriter, and she's got 3 albums out. And so, yeah, it's a really strong community in Melbourne. You know, I mean, people from all around Australia move to Melbourne to get some traction, and it's a good scene, very supportive. So we all play in each other's bands. I've got a big bunch of friends, and yeah, it's a nice thing. I think you really need that as an artist, musician. Without the community, you know, it's a pretty lonely existence.
And Dave Watkins, I should have said something earlier. Speaking about the title track of the album, I want to be sure I mention this. What he starts doing on that ride cymbal about halfway through the song, I just fell back in my chair, and I thought, nobody does this. I don't hear this in other songs. This is amazing. And he just starts, I don't know if that was completely improvised, if you knew it was happening, if it was arranged, but just, folks, listen to the whole album, but listen to the title track. You're going to fall in love with it. I just love that open percussion, kind of jazzy, don't know what I'm going to be banging on next. And yeah, just, it was perfect.
Yeah, he's great, Dave. I probably haven't spoke about him enough in interviews, but yeah, he did a great job playing on the album. He's moved to another state of Australia, so I haven't really seen him for a while, but yeah, it would be nice to live. I play with different people than the album, but yeah, he did a great job.
All right. Well, anything else that you want to promote here? Anything you want to plug?
Not really, no. I'm just really busy. The album, The Ballad of Cowboy Dan, I just wanted to say was I recorded a spoken word album over lockdown, which never came to fruition, and so The Ballad of Cowboy Dan was part of that, and that's why it came onto the new project with more of a song-based project. So I'm working on the spoken word album now, and so that's going to be yeah, I guess that's going to be what the original version of The Ballad of Cowboy Dan would have been like without song structure, so a little bit more abstract. So that's exciting, and hopefully I'll be able to talk to you about that once I get it off the ground. But I want to say thanks so much for having me, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and really refreshing to talk to someone that's really gone deep on the album and listened, and it's a really good feeling. So thank you, Dan.
You're welcome, and thanks for, again, dedicating the time for this. I feel like I get long-winded at times. The discussion just goes on and on, and so I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I certainly did, and I would love to talk to you again after the next release.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dan. Well, and maybe see you in the States. Maybe I'll make my way to Melbourne, Australia. It's on the bucket list. Any plan? You probably don't have any immediate plans for any international touring, right?
Nothing immediate, but I certainly would like to get back to the US. The last time I was there was 2011. I did South by, and I played in LA and in New York, and always have a good time there. And I mean, even though my music's kind of selling ice to the Eskimos, I find US audiences kind of appreciate what I do. And so no, I'd love to get back there. So yeah, stay tuned, I guess. We'll see.
All right. Well, you look great. You sound great. I'm so happy to hear. I had no idea about your sobriety. So keep on keeping on, man. And
Yeah,
I'm glad that I found you and discovered your music just through this podcast. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have, but I love what you're doing.
thank you, Dan.
Okay, folks. So that's it for this episode of Dan Time. And remember, there's music outside of your bubble just waiting to delight your ears, and you're only a few clicks away from finding it. If you keep listening to the show, I'm going to make it my mission to always introduce artists to you that you would not have ordinarily found. You wouldn't have scrolled to the bottom of the page where it says, oh, you like this, you might also like these 4 or 5 others. You're not going to find everything that you need to hear that way. So I don't even know how to wrap that comment up, but remember, go to Dan Brodie, BRODIE.com.au. Check out his catalog if you're on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you stream music. Check out the back catalog as well. This has been great. You guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time on the Dan Time Podcast. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
All right. If you love that episode, if you're enjoying the Dan Time Podcast, be sure to download and subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can reach me at dantimepod@gmail.com. If you really want to connect with Dan Time through the week, visit any of the social media pages. I'm on X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can't miss me. And if nothing else, as I've said before, just talk about the show. If you're having a good time with it, tell your friends about it. Send a text about it. I appreciate you as a listener. Hope you have a great week. I'll see you next Sunday.